I'm coming in hot with 5 things that women do not want anymore. Number 1, we don't want to compete with men in the workplace. Men can have the 9 to 5. Number 2, we don't want to spend our most fertile years chasing a job or a degree.
We are so excited to announce the launch of our fall online mentoring course. Grab your tickets today, as we actually just released a guide. The guide is called Finding Freedom from Masculinity. So as girls, we can sometimes feel like we're victims of our emotions. Our emotions are controlling and ruling our lives.
Needing some new Christian-friendly positions to try in the bedroom today?
You're not going to give into the delusion. 1, men can be women, or 2, men should dress up like women.
All of those talking points about how we need to have inclusive language, I personally just unpacked how I think that is the most ridiculous, damaging thing ever.
We're told that we're hateful, we're told that we're bigoted, we're told we're transphobic. All of this celebrating pride and queer and gender non-conforming, it's appalling. And what I find most disturbing about it is that adults pushing this agenda saying we can define ourselves however we want and we will celebrate that. Drag queens and the celebration of this sort of entertainment is such a mockery on God's design for womanhood.
Oh yeah, we were painting very black lines in scripture and saying this is what's biblical and this is what isn't. And we've come to realize the scripture doesn't actually draw those lines that we were drawing. And it's like, where are we getting these ideas from?
Let's talk for a second about abstinence, the act of not acting, of not doing the deed, being in some eyes the absolute most effective form of birth control around.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
Would you believe me that if I told you that to some, the very idea of abstinence isn't enough when it comes to the topic of bedtime activities? You probably would. Doing the deed, in the words of many religious texts, is sinful when committed out of wedlock. It's a take that for decades people have begun to push back on and question for a multitude of reasons, but it is still such a deeply ingrained value in religions across the world that even in 2024, we see content like this.
Is a good thing and is God ordained in the right context, which is marriage, not dating.
Or this.
We got married like 2 years into being together, and it was not easy waiting till marriage.
Even this.
There are so many Christian women who struggle when it comes to marriage and having sex with their husbands. Like, they don't know how to be sexy because they've been taught their whole life, like, you better keep your clothes on and be a good girl and never let a man look at you in a lustful way.
Influencers run the gamut like Nate and Sutton, Brittany Dawn Nelson, Paul and Morgan, Chelsea and Nick, and also a pair of women named Bethany and Kristen who go under the more well-known name Girl Defined. If you spent any time on YouTube over the last half a decade or so, you know who Girl Defined is. You know about the memes, you know about the problematic videos, you know about the dance.
Break the silence wherever you are, sisters come together.
You probably also know that Girl Defined are the preeminent fundy Christian influencers covering the idea of purity culture, the belief that the big bad S is not to be committed before wedlock, and the idea that women need to uphold gender roles at all costs. My favorite. Andrew Tate is loving this. It's a story that's been heard many times before on YouTube and in traditional media, to the point that even Bethany and Christian are certified lol cows. So why am I covering it today? Well, besides the fact that y'all have been asking me for a really long time, have you ever stopped to consider why it is that a pair of young women, both whom are chronically online, were so devoted to a position that saw them face constant ridicule and scorn, only for at least one of them to turn heel in the strangest of ways and become a positive relationship influencer, just, you know, for religion? And have you ever wondered why both of them seem so sure of themselves and their convictions, even if they change, even when every new development in their lives subtly contradicts the takes they previously had? It's a story that doesn't seek to skirt the blame away from Bethany and Christy so much as contextualize the dramatic shift their lives have taken in recent years, at least as it seems to be to the public, when one of their siblings revealed that the story of Girl Defined may in fact actually be the story of women coerced, controlled, and harmed into acting a way that they might not even believe in. Or maybe, potentially even more tragically, they do believe it because it's all they ever knew. And all of that serves as a reminder that sometimes the darkest monsters aren't the ones that we see on our screens. They could be lurking just off camera. Girl Defined may not actually be the story that most people tell. Instead, it potentially could be a story of generational trauma. And this is what we know. Oh, hi there. Hello, hello, hi. It's my face again, Swoop. If you're seeing me for the first time, my name is Swoop. Welcome. I'm a filmmaker and I make documentaries and short films on unsolved cases, true crime, and social media influencers who abuse their power and manipulate audiences because, as I always say, it's not drama, it's dangerous. Now, fun fact, did you know there are 6 forms of documentary film, and my work is a hybrid of 2 styles, expository and performative documentaries. So you'll get the facts, my perspective, and a chance to share your own. We also dig deeper into the root psychology, and sometimes, yes, we take it to petty university because, honey, listen, okay, petty is my coping mechanism for all the bizarre that life likes to throw at us. If you want to join our community, all are welcome, and you can also grab your exclusive valid ribcage and valid social club apparel from the Petty University shop, linked below as always. Also, are you following me on Instagram? That's where I post most often, so please do find me there. Let's connect. Okay, we're gonna dive right in, but real quick, qu'est-ce que tu veux faire des musons? Or let me put it another way, qual è la cosa divertente che puoi fare? In English, what's something fun that you want to do just for you? So a couple of years ago, I spent a month in Europe working on a short film, and I split my time between Stockholm, Paris, and Italy, and it was the most magical experience ever, eating new foods, the gorgeous sights, and meeting new people at random cafes. I love that. But communicating was interesting because I only knew like a touch of French and not a lick of Italian. I mean, unless gelato counts, in which case I'm a master at the Italian language. So this time I'm learning Italian, and it's way easier and more fun than I can imagine because I'm learning with Babbel. So Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world, and I am addicted. Like, did you know that Babbel is scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks? I can't even get a date in 3 weeks, but learn a whole new language? Sì, grazie. Yes, please. Babbel is like having a personal language coach right on your phone, guiding you into real life conversations. And with summer travel just around the corner, you could speak like a local in just 10 minutes a day with Babbel. So it'll give you a prompt where you can hear a word, and then it'll ask you to select which word you think it is, and it'll also give you the definition of what that means.
Piacere.
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 Piacere. That means pleased to meet you. I didn't know that. How are you? The formal version.
Come sta?
Come sta?
Buonasera.
Buonasera. Good evening. The lessons are designed by real language teachers, so you'll be having practical, real-world conversations in no time. And let me tell you, you'll look like a boss bee when you're ordering at restaurants, okay? Yes, darling. Il canto, por favore. And then it translates it directly below, so you get like more real-world practical learning.
Sì, anch'io sto bene, grazie.
Sì, anch'io sto bene, grazie. Yes, I am also well, thank you.
Ciao, Chiara.
Ciao, Chiara. And that finishes that lesson. Super easy, super fun. Like, tell me right now, what language would you like to learn and why? Leave me a comment right now, I'm so curious. Join me on this new language journey and tap my link below and get a massive 60% off on your subscription and try Babbel today. Babbel offers a 20-day money-back guarantee, so there's really no risk, but you're going to love it, I promise. Mwah, ciao bella, au revoir beauté, treat yourself, honey, you deserve it. Okay, back to the doc. Now, I just want to say before we jump into this story, while there will be some discussions around religion, please remember, as always, to keep the comments cute. Anytime I cover a topic where religion is a part of it, I want to make a reminder that religion is not a monolith. Like, people interpret their faith differently. We can respect a person's right to practice or to not practice a faith, and no one single person represents an entire religion. Just because someone is an asshole with their faith, people are people, and people can up, but it doesn't mean that everyone of every community are also bad. All right, enough of that, let's dive in. It all started in San Antonio, Texas, St. Anthony, the oldest municipality in Texas, home of the Alamo and the tallest cowboy boots on earth. But another thing San Antonio is particularly well known for is being a predominantly Christian city in a state that, according to the Pew Research Center, is 77% Christian, meaning it's one of the absolutely most predictable places for a pair of future fundamentalist influencers to be born. And wouldn't you know it, on on January 7th, 1987, Kristen Baird was brought into the world, followed shortly thereafter by her little sister Bethany in 1988. The pair were a product of a fundamentalist Christian group by the names of Michael and Heidi Baird, the second and third children respectfully of 8 children overall. By all accounts, Kristen and Bethany and their siblings lived a relatively sheltered life, shockingly, both of them being homeschooled, but found joy in various places. So Bethany, for instance, was very good at basketball. So good, in fact, that she was offered multiple scholarships and at one point was looking down the barrel of any school that she wanted to go to for higher education, which is pretty cool. Kristen, meanwhile, had managed to leverage her natural good looks into a potential career in modeling, something Bethany attempted for a while as well.
Today's vlog is called Why We Gave Up Modeling to Pursue Ministry Instead.
Both of these sisters abandoned these plans eventually, and rather abruptly, however, with Kristen stating that modeling didn't fit with her Christian values, and Bethany citing a conversation with her parents as the catalyst for not going to college. Really wonder what that conversation was, because most of the parents are like, hey, you need to get your ass in college, but you know. I will, fortunately or unfortunately, be talking a little bit later about Mama Heidi, and you can be the judge of how that conversation may have gone. But in the meantime, what are 2 sheltered girls to do when they put themselves further in the shelter? All they've got are their looks, their charm, and their faith. Oh, and they've got an internet connection. So combine all of those things and it's the perfect recipe for the girls to craft their own destiny online. This cluster-cluss of web design and broken images is the earliest archive of BairdSisters.com, the website belonging to Bethany, Kristen, and lesser-known sister Elisa, who dropped out after this phase of the girls' online career. I wonder what she thinks about all of this now. Not much remains online regarding what exactly the Baird sisters website entailed, but from what I could find on a Facebook page promoting the website, it was at one point an ad for the sisters to be hired as models, thus the Facebook name of Models Wanted, a promotion tool for various other ministry-related services and websites, and most importantly, a blog that focused on their faith. BairdSisters.com doesn't exist anymore, and quite frustratingly, almost every page on the Wayback Machine is either broken or beyond repair, or strangely redirects to Jay Aubrey's video on Girl Defined from 2018. We love you in this house, Jay Aubrey, but this doesn't look like a Baird Sisters About Us page to me. From the Facebook page, however, we can see posts about sexual sin involving women inviting men to lust, because of course a man's lust is always a woman's fault. Fiddly-dee! We also see posts that are, wow, my voice went so high up there, but I'm just sorry, when I get into like the purity culture-y, like very like Andrew Tate adjacent stuff, it just makes my blood just do things. We also see posts that are anti-choice for women, so and perhaps most tellingly for a future topic, a number of posts on whether you, the Christian woman, should do it before marriage. And no, I'm not talking about the hokey pokey, though that also comes up. When I say do it, I mean kiss. Seriously, kiss. Mwah. There's now a deleted 3-part series on whether kissing before marriage is Christian, a topic which Bethany would return to in incredibly dramatic fashion later in her life. It's gonna get wild. Now, believe it or not, from 2009 to 2013, when the Bairds ran this page, Facebook wasn't the place your uncle fell for vaccine skeptic propaganda, or your auntie complained in her local community scanner group about how Raising Cane's, a place that doesn't serve tacos, deserves to be shut down for not having tacos, okay? I'm tired of this. I'm sick of these chicken places not having tacos. I know that they're a taco place, but really, they should just be out of business, okay? That was a thing. That was really a thing. And judging by the traffic, or honestly, like lack thereof, on that Facebook page, the Baird sisters weren't having an easy go of it trying to make it online. So in 2014, they reconfigured the entire premise of the website and decided to focus on younger women aged 16 to 18, dropped their sister Lisa for reasons unclear. Sorry, sis. this? They more explicitly position themselves as a ministry by registering as a nonprofit and committed fully to a new vision under the name Girl Defined. So where did the name Girl Defined come from? Well, according to their bio on girldefined.com, quote, after putting our modeling dreams to rest, we both felt God stirring within us a passion for something more. We dove into God's word to study what he had to say about our design as women. The more we learned, the more we felt compelled to share it, and that's when God opened the doors to launch Girl Defined's ministries. Since launching Girl Defined Ministries in 2014, our goal has always been the same, to help modern girls understand and live out God's timeless truth for womanhood. In a day and age when girls and women receive so many conflicting messages about their value, purpose, and identity, they desperately need to know that the only one who can define them is the one who created them. Though interestingly enough, Girl Defined will go on a long road of defining girls based on their ideas, but I digress. So in short, they believed that they could help women find their true selves as they say their faith sees them. Simply put, there's one way to be a woman, and these two women from Texas who have never been kissed and not in a Drew Barrymore way know exactly what you need to do it and to be a woman and a girl defined. Now, to their credit, this rebranding seemed to work a little bit, at least in the fundamentalist Christian space. And again, these spaces exist. They are allowed to exist. People can express themselves as long as they're not hurting other people, but that's gonna be not where this story goes. By 2016, the girls had already expanded to YouTube with hit vlogs like Strong Girls Obey God's Word Even When It's Hard, Femininity Gone Wrong, and The Modern Woman's Struggle with Sexual Sin.
Hey guys, it's Kristen and Bethany here with Girl Defined Ministries, and in today's vlog, we really want to talk about the modern woman's struggle with sexual sin. So this past year, Kristen and I both really had a burden just to help young women and women who are struggling with sexual sin.
They also published a book titled Girl Defined, God's Radical Design for Beauty, Femininity, and Identity.
Her makeup-covered face, dyed blonde hair, and sparkling clothes only hid what she was feeling on the inside. Depressed, unloved, alone. Sadly, the beauty and fame wasn't enough to satisfy her. Marilyn Monroe committed suicide at the young age of 36. If Marilyn Monroe had everything a woman could dream of and it still wasn't enough, what does that mean for average everyday girls like us? Like Marilyn, millions of women are searching for their identity. Join us on a liberating journey toward a radically better vision for femininity.
By the following year, they published another book called Love Defined. The next year, another book. They just be cranking out the books, y'all. This one titled S, Purity and the Language of a Girl's Heart. And if you couldn't tell by the title of that last book, the general themes of all of these topics and the general vibe of these ladies, a huge part of the Girl Defined brand, one that would become strangely ironic later on in this story, is a topic you may remember from my doc on Brittany Dawn Nelson from 2023. And that would be the topic of purity culture. Gird your loins.
All right, everyone, gird your loins.
In a perfect world, the term purity culture would be the name of a cool designer brand. You know, like Purity Culture by Jean-Paul Superfranche, now available at Frangé and Flammart. Regrettably, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's actually the bane of my existence. But it is instead a term for a certain subset of a Christian movement that rose to prominence in the 1990s and 2000s. Now, according to Christabel Thwaites at The Conversation, purity culture was built on an established religious ethic, sexual abstinence until marriage. But it came to encompass a subculture in American evangelical Christianity centered around maintaining sexual purity. To put it simply, purity culture is what happens when you take a step or 1,000 steps past no bedroom stuff before marriage. It is the very idea that bedroom activities and sexual attraction are inherently wrong outside of wedlock, to the point that even dating was discouraged due to the fear that it could lead not only to physical impurity, but emotional impurity. Now, to some of us, it might seem funny. After all, a culture so obsessed with the idea that the big S can make a person a sinner, that even the 12 steps down the road maybe method of S, which is, simply going on a date or giving somebody your number, can be seen as impure. Now, again, people have their beliefs. To me, I just feel like if you want to get married, how are you going to get to that place if you don't date a person and get to know them and even know if they're healthy for you and vice versa? Okay, anyways, that's kind of purity culture in a nutshell as it has evolved. An immediate problem, often a problem that hasn't even happened, being avoided. In this case, basic, SUL education, because it's easier to decry something as evil and scrub any nuanced conversations around it than to approach it head on. A simple example of this could be, what about people who don't believe in the institution of marriage because maybe you watched Bailey Sarian's Dark History episode on weddings and learned it stems from the ancient tradition of ownership of a woman, where now it's mostly just a legally binding contract, even though you can have a healthy, committed relationship without said contract and 50% of them fail miserably anyways? Or what about people who have gone from one abusive relationship to the next and shouldn't have to legally bind themselves to a person in order to be seen as valid or experience healthy intimacy in life? What about those people? Those are the questions I always have in relation to purity culture. Now, to absolutely no one's surprise, purity culture often comes from a place that centers a man above all else. Andrew Asswipe Tate's ears are perking up.
I say what I think, and if some of my views come across in a misogynistic tone, then that is your problem.
Women, according to a lot of purists of purity culture, are evil, sultry temptresses. They need to dress conservatively because it's women's fault if men look at them. God forbid men have to take responsibility for themselves like ever, and women have to avoid interacting with men so they do not tempt men and always, always know their place. And babe, a lot of times that place is in the kitchen. I'm not even joking, this is still a thing. Now, journalist Kelsey Weekman, one of the best in the game when it comes to coverage of controversial online figures, put it best for BuzzFeed, quote, according to the dictates of purity culture, married Christian men can speak publicly about S. And then she cites a post from Cole LeBrant, who proudly posted, no longer a virgin, #marriage rocks during his honeymoon, which if you haven't seen it, I also have a documentary on the world of the LeBrant family. I highly recommend you watch it. I'll try to remember to link it below. But in contrast, Kelsey points out that Cole LeBrant's wife, Savannah, posted a sad video named The Truth About Savannah's Past that grapples with how she wasn't a V, the big V, when the two of them got married, and Cole was praised by fans for staying celibate. So do you kind of see the double standard? One could easily interpret that as praise for the man, shame for the woman, as if we don't have to deal with that enough on a daily basis.
I don't feel respected anymore.
Pretty much, if you're giving somebody marriage privileges before marriage,
that's a perfect way to say it. Don't give your boyfriend husband privileges because they're not going to respect you.
Because God knows there's no such thing as a man who is capable of respecting his partner if she gives up the goodies before marriage, because marriage is always the answer, and every woman needs to get married to be a complete person. And y'all, listen, I am not in any way bashing marriage. If you are married and it is healthy and you are happy and it's working for you, then I could not be happier for you. That is, a marriage can be a very, very beautiful thing. It can also be a horrifying thing and a very trapped and abusive and coercive thing for a lot of people, a lot of which I have witnessed. And so I personally have very strong feelings about it, which you probably have been able to collect. I just want to make sure that all perspectives are shown here. You don't have to get married to be considered a whole person. I thought somebody should say that. I also think it's safe to say that I am not really a fan of purity culture. I think it's pretty flippin' damaging to women. And yes, this is coming from someone, me, who has my own faith and my own beliefs. I've always had them. I always will have them. And I don't think that I need to shove it down anyone's throat. I just think it's okay if we accept people having different perspectives with how they experience the world. I think everything is about perspective, and marriage is right for some, terrible for others, and that's the truth. What makes purity culture even worse, in my opinion, is that after the 2000s, it didn't go away altogether. It just rebranded, okay? Don't call her nothing if not an overachiever. But there are probably no influencers more synonymous with purity culture than Bethany and Kristen, whose entire brand centers around a kind of purity that they can guide young girls towards, that they state is the only right way to be.
Number 1, we don't want to compete with men in the workplace. Men can have the 9 to 5. Number 2, we don't want to spend our most fertile years chasing a job or a degree.
Now, normally this is the part where I would just I would try to pull back and stay relatively neutral, even though I do not have to. Y'all know Swoop can and will share her opinions, but it is really challenging to be neutral when statements exist detailing the massive harm their platforms have caused. Take, for instance, this Reddit post from user Petty Fundy, come on, Petty Fundimental, from 2022, that outlines the time that they allegedly spent as an intern for Bethany and Kristen. Quote, former Girl Defined intern here. I've always been very open on my social media about the fact that I used to work for Girl Defined, and it's one of the greatest regrets in my life. It took a lot of reading and absorbing religious deconstruction content for me to start healing. I see Bethany's posts about sexual sin and brokenness, and I think about how I was guilted into apologizing to my parents for things that literally had nothing to do with them when I moved out. I see Kristen's podcast about starting a family and how I felt so fearful that I would never be enough for a man or healthy enough to have babies because of my disabilities. I think about being raised in a household that preached conservative and traditional marriage values almost to the point of dehumanizing anyone who didn't share our same views. It just hurts to think that there will be more young people caught up in purity culture, modesty mentality, and fundamental literalism to the point where they devalue anyone who disagrees with them, but also devalue themselves for not truly feeling like they belong. And I think that's a really open, very raw post that they made, so I appreciate that. Purity culture, from my perspective, is a mindset largely of guilt. It's a culture often rooted in misogyny that positions one way of living for women while being much more flexible and forgiving for men. And you know this is serious because did you hear how my voice cracked? I was like, no, I sound like a goat. Imagine that, things being harder on women than men. Shocking! By positioning itself so rigidly, purity culture also opens the door down a narrow hallway of other problematic mindsets that Girl Defined were able to exploit in increasingly problematic ways. For instance, Kristen has been fairly consistent for years over her belief that feminists do not have any respect for themselves. In fact, I'm sorry. In fact, I'm gonna get through this. In fact, being an independent woman, bad. Big bad. Being an sexually liberated woman, big, big, big bad. Posing nude for a magazine cover, the baddest. I'm not joking about the last one. In a 2014 blog post, Kristen wrote, and you know what, I feel like I should give this a little bit of a dramatic reading. I was at our local grocery store the other day in the checkout aisle when I saw her. I had never seen anything this disturbing in my grocery store before. There she was, right in front of my eyes, without a shirt on. I'm not exaggerating here. Thankfully, she was wearing jeans, but she was shirtless. Frustration began to well up inside me. Why would a family-friendly grocery store allow this shirtless woman to parade herself down the checkout aisle, just parading down the aisle? There are little children and unsuspecting fathers being exposed to her nakedness. I finally made it out of the store and was shaken up, to say the least. Where has our dignity gone as females? First of all, I'm sorry. I can't, anytime I hear someone use the word females when referring to like women, girls, you know, all I can think of is Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fab Fit Fun Fabulous, and like all of the like the Matrix red pill, blue pill boys who only refer to women as females.
Female.
Back to the post. She finished this by dropping a bombshell. Because it would be shocking, right, if you just saw a topless female parading herself down the aisle of a grocery store. In most every city and state in the country, it's probably illegal, right? But that's not actually even what happened, so let's read on. As shocking as it was for me to see a topless woman in my grocery store, I am grateful for two things. Number one, she was on a magazine cover and not there in person. Number two, she was using her arm to partially cover her nakedness. So let me get this straight. You mean to tell me that she wasn't an actual physical woman in real life in this wholesome story that she wanted to rage bait readers into thinking she was. Got it. Nor was she actually naked. Got it. And if she was using her arm to cover her God-given milk devices, then she was likely more covered than all of the women in bikinis that your kids see anytime you take them to a swimming pool or the beach. Got it. And you're openly shaming a woman for making a decision about her life that has nothing to do with you, and you don't even know why she made the decision to do this. Got it. And you're making a blanket post titled "A Popular Way to Lose Your Respect as a Girl" about every woman who lives her life on her rules and not according to men, also ignoring the very real and valid nuances to those conversations where in many instances, not all of them, some do it purely because they enjoy it, others take to this line of work as a trauma response to many wonderful things like being abused, being poor, being a person of color who's intentionally goes overlooked, or the religious trauma that many girls face since the age of like 5 when they're told that they only exist to be pleasing to men and to become the property of men through what we call, say it with me, marriage. But we don't want to have those nuanced conversations, do we? Got it. Even as recently as 2020, Kristen wrote about an anecdote where she and her husband Zach got into a fight she didn't want to continue, but Zach pressured her to keep discussing. Amazingly, Kristen positions herself as an aggressor and then creates an entire screed on how the independent woman is a sham. Literally, the independent woman is a sham. So I am a sham, my mother's a sham, my grandmother's a sham. Any of y'all out there watching this and you're an independent woman, you're a sham. It's just, we're all sham. Shim, shammy, sham, sham.
Sham wow, you'll be saying wow every time.
Quote, whether you're currently married or single, our culture is pressuring you to attain an unhealthy level of independence. You're encouraged to separate yourself from your parents, from your family, from your husband, and from your children. Who is encouraging mothers to separate themselves from their children? I don't even, where are you seeing this? I need proof. I need some stats and evidence so that I can research this. Because what? I'll keep reading. You're encouraged to pursue what you want when you want. Shove everyone aside because you come first. In our book, Girl Defined, we actually identify 3 pillars of counterfeit femininity. Why does this sound like an Andrew Tate for dummies? Which is saying a lot because Andrew Tate's a dummy. But we go on. So you got the pillars of counterfeit femininity, and independence is one of those pillars. So again, independent women are counterfeit femininity. Girl Defined is here to define your femininity, and guess what? Independence means you don't cut it. Our culture is pressuring and encouraging women to embrace a mindset and attitude that are totally contrary to God's best for us, and total independence is one of those lies. I'm just like, listen, I'm still gonna reserve perspective, right? Right now, when I read that, just my gut reaction, I guess coming from my counterfeit femininity, all I want to say is any women in the world have been beaten into submission by society since, I don't know, the Brittany dawn of time, and embracing healthy independence is good for all of society. Think of how much innovation has come from women. Independent women, good thing. It's called evolving into a smarter species. Trust me, when I was in a relationship and suffering with coercive control and being told and monitored and everything about what I did, and I got free from that and became the independent woman, the counterfeit feminine, I guess that I am, trust me, life is a lot better. And it's kind of like many of Kristen's screeds against the independent women always seem to boil down to one question. Why aren't you obeying your husband, you wretched wench? But what about Bethany? Bethany is a bit more direct about the picture she wants to paint, and people can change, and we welcome the change. But in 2015, she wrote a blog with the blunt title, "Feminism is Laughing at Our God." Now, feminism, which by a solid definition is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality, I mean, heaven forbid women be treated equally, is used as an allegory she provides about the old adage of David versus Goliath. Now, I don't have to explain David versus versus Goliath, right? Like one of the most iconic representations of, an underdog fighting a literal giant. It's been used when talking about like a private citizen suing a massive corporation, or a perceived weaker fighter taking down the favorite in a fight. Like I've even used it to describe my own relationship with cheesecake, okay? A Goliath that always seems to win in the end, but one day. But another good example of David versus Goliath could be the very idea of equality for women, considering the existence of the women's lib movement, multiple waves of feminism, unequal pay for women uniformly still existing, thousands of years of systemic violence against women. Like, you see, despite the male name, there's no clearer underdog in the man-woman dichotomy than women. So take a guess who Goliath is in Bethany's article. I'll wait. Okay, time's up. Pencils down, class. The correct answer is feminism. Feminism, come on down. Come on down. Quote, "We have a massive Goliath mocking our God. Her name is feminism. She's been standing on the hill laughing at us for way too long. It's time for us to do what David did. It's time to stand up to feminism and say, enough is enough." This is the wildest thing I've ever read. I cannot stress this enough. The definition of feminism is advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality. So I guess it's time to stand up to the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality and say enough is enough, equality. We're sick of you. Sorry, it's not actually, none of this is funny. This is just my pettiness. This is just how I cope. Again, I just feel like potato tot tater man is just gonna pop out like any second. I look at these types of things and I just kind of think like, did they miss the part in the Bible where Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself, like equally? Or the whole part where the Bible says that Eve, women were created from the rib of Adam, meaning from his side, meaning side by side, meaning equal to. But I don't know, perhaps Bethy thinks women were made from a man's ass for him to freely shit upon her with no consequence to humanity. But I digress.
Hey, Future Swoop here. So I'm sitting here editing this piece, and I had a few thoughts as I'm going through this that I didn't articulate quite as much as I think I wanted to. And it's about perspective. I've been trying to focus more on, again, the perspective and what could be like point and counterpoint with these stories, not just like laying out and listing endless lists of like problematic behavior or allegedly problematic behavior, but more so what is, the point that people have issue with, and then what could be the counterpoint, meaning what could be the root of that? Could there be something else going on that we're not really digging deep enough to find? Does that change the conversation about the behavior, or doesn't it? These are just questions that I have. And in this story in particular, I've been really intrigued by the idea of their upbringing and any potential indoctrination that may have happened, potentially. Again, this is just a bit of speculation, but within the family. And is there something more at the root? Could it be things like, literally being born into a scenario where someone is only being exposed to one particular behavior or set of beliefs? And is there opportunity for learning and for unlearning things that could be potentially harmful to vulnerable communities? And can we carve space out for that? What can we take away from this that's a little more open and hope for change? So keep that in mind, and I'll probably pop in every now and then and ask more of that perspective question.
That's nothing compared to the absolute show that came out of a Q&A the ladies held back in 2019. Now, heads up, there will be brief, non-graphic discussion of SA. During the Q&A, the ladies received a question regarding a woman grappling with balancing her faith as well as her SUL history. You guys know I have to abbreviate doing the deed as S or SUL. The woman who submitted the question discusses SUL acts that were done with or without consent, which is potentially an acknowledgement of being SA'd to some degree. Their response was not very good.
First thing I want to say to you and to any of us who have experienced sexual purity, which that's me, that's you, that's everyone. None of us are perfectly pure, and that's the whole point of why Christ died. Yeah. We are all sexually broken. We're all impure. We all struggle with lust. We all sin and need to repent of that sin before God.
It's different ways.
It's just in different ways. That is why Christ died, so that he could forgive our past and redeem our future.
Now, there are plenty of places that we could start on this particular answer, and plenty of words we can use when talking about telling someone who is indicating a potential SA when they say without consent. That would be totally appropriate given the situation. Many of my peers on YouTube covered this as it was happening back in 2019, like Rachel Oates, I Never, and James Marriott. So I think I'm going to focus on something a little different and focus instead on the apology Girl Defined released for this issue.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen and Bethany here with Girl Defined Ministries, and today we're going to be talking about why sexual abuse is never okay. If you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual abuse, we want to first say that we are deeply sorry. This act is evil and it breaks our hearts and it breaks God's heart. And in fact, we're close to several people who have been victims of sexual abuse. And being close to them and watching them walk this journey, it has been a long and challenging season for them.
Now again, perspective. Y'all know I'm big on it. So let's talk for a moment about perspective and the very idea of bad actors doing good things. Now this video, to play it as absolutely fair as I can, is actually a fairly decent response to a controversy that I've seen from a YouTuber. It provides stats.
According to the Center for Family Justice, about 1 in 4 women are in their lifetime.
It provides transparency.
In a recent Q&A video that we posted, many of you expressed concern about the non-consensual part of her email. We are grateful for your concerns and we completely agree with you. Therefore, I want to read the same question that we previously read in our Q&A video and take some time to specifically focus on the non-consensual part of the email.
And it seeks to not sidestep any of the ways in which Bethany and Kristen failed in their initial Q&A.
When we first read that email from that girl, it seemed to us that she was specifically asking questions about her own past sexual choices and whether or not she could get back on track with her relationship with God and move forward in walking in purity.
What makes this video disappointing are all the times the two of them managed to continue shaming women for their choices.
When it comes to sexual activity, one of two things are happening. Either one, we are willing participants in this activity, or two, sexual actions are being done against us without our permission. There's a very clear and distinct line between the two.
To be clear, this isn't true. It's common for an SA survivor to be in an abusive relationship where they're what's called trauma bonded to their abuser and give consent it's basically under duress and psychological, all kinds of things, right? I'm just loosely speaking about this because I have lived it. A lot of times they're too afraid to withdraw consent for fear of further violence, so they play a role, and many do so for a very long time. Some unfortunately do this for the rest of their lives, and it's not easy to get out. I know for a fact it's not easy to get out.
And we want you to know that if you are a victim of sexual abuse or assault, that you are not responsible for the actions that someone else committed against you. And in fact, we want you to know that you are not damaged goods as a result of sexual abuse.
Making the distinction that an SA survivor is not damaged goods simultaneously makes the implication that if you are SUL by choice, you are damaged goods. So do with that what you will. And by do with that, I mean, please throw it in the trash. You're not damaged goods. You're not.
Hi, me again. So this would be one of those, again, another perspective moment here, right? Where I'm really curious about the idea of indoctrination with children, especially when it comes to religion. And is that, just speculating, is that potential in this story if they were raised in a faith that was telling them that women are, damaged goods if you have SUL relationships before marriage? And how does that shape your mind and your view? I was raised in a system and within a church that had very similar ideals. And so for me, that carried a lot of shame, especially as I am a survivor. And so that I just internalized a lot of it as I am shameful and damaged, which is not the truth. And it's taken me a very, very, very long time to kind of deprogram myself from that. So I'm always curious in these types of stories, is that at play? And then what does that mean on how we interpret?
Now, this isn't a situation where I'm demanding that they take accountability for every single transgression. This is a thing where any goodwill established by this one video is largely undercut by the fact that they could have, at the bare minimum, taken many chances over the past few years to do an even smaller scale, lower effort version of what they did with this video, and they didn't. For example, how about the time Kristen said gay people had a sneaky agenda? There's that agenda popping. They're all about the agenda. Quote, as a result of their strategic marketing and political influence, they have convinced, I'm assuming they must be the gays. The gays are everywhere. You're all just one monolith, okay? All of the gays. The gays have convinced most Americans that they are actually a distinct people race. In the past, our battle was for the equality of African American people. Hold up, wait a second, I'm sorry. Was that your battle? Were you fighting the battle for the equality of people like me? Because why don't I really think that you were fighting that battle? But I don't know, tell me more. What in the whole grain does any of this have to do with black people? I swear we are just trying to mind our own business. But now the battle is for equality for the homosexual. God forbid we just treat people equally. And I'm just like, since when has any queer person seriously, legitimately tried to position their orientation as a race, like the human race? There's the human race and the gay race. Actually, the gay race sounds like a really fun show, right after Drag Race. I don't know what I'm saying. I love the gay community. Y'all are beautiful. And for some reason, it didn't just stop with humans. Oh no. They don't discriminate with hate. They went for pride wearing pets too.
Is that pets are not confused about their gender. No, pets are not confused. They get it. Pets know. When they're a male pet, they know, and they act out on their male instincts, their male nature. When a pet is a female, they function like a female pet, and they act out on their female instincts, their female biology, their female nature. They're not confused. I have a girl dog, a female dog. Her name is Sadie. She's about to turn 9 in a couple months. She is the cutest little Maltipoo ever. She has not been confused once about the fact that she's a female, and she acts like a female dog.
Okay, so like, oh, my mom's gonna get a tickle out of this. Is this the part in the story where I share that pets don't think about gender, like, at all, at least not that I'm aware of, and making content about the sexual orientation of animals is freaking weird? Or is this the part where I mentioned that I've had 2 cats who were, in your terms, very gay? I'm not even like, one of my sweet boy cats only wanted to try to mate the other boy cat and not the girls, and my sweet little baby pork chop apparently is queer as fuck, because he literally bites the back of the necks and tries to mate literally every cat he sees, gender be damned. And did we forget that dogs hump like everything and everyone? So fiddly-dee, I guess my cat is an abomination, except no, you're not, pork chop. Don't listen to any of this. So how did Girl Defined become so popular? The truth is, Girl Defined became a kind of powerhouse that they did in the fundy scene completely on accident. I've talked a lot about the Streisand effect, named for instances where celebrities talking about something like a controversy, for instance, paradoxically makes more people aware of it. This is like a side story version of the Streisand effect, where the Girl Defined galleys didn't necessarily address or try to correct a controversy. They simply capitalized off of the seemingly random feature they got when Cody Ko and Noel Miller featured them on their series That's Cringe.
Welcome back to That's Cringe, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are tackling religion.
Huge disclaimer.
We're not. Today we're gonna look at a YouTube channel called Girl Defined.
This is Cody Ko and Noel Miller covering Girl Defined back at the start of 2018. Now, up until this point, Girl Defined was a very niche topic for people outside of the fundy scene, but this first video that Cody and Noel made today has 34 million views.
Hey girls, it's Bethany and Kristen with Girl Defined, and today we want to answer the question, is it okay to be obsessed with guys?
We can't watch this video.
Why?
We're not girls.
Oh, he said, hey girls.
Yeah. This video's over.
Sorry, we'll go to the next one.
I remember one time
a specific story where I was totally obsessed with this one guy. In fact, I remember seeing him for the first time, and then from that point on, he is all I thought about day and night.
Yeah, that's called being horny.
I mean, that's my whole problem with these videos.
Yeah.
They're just talking about normal people deal with when they're growing up.
Yeah.
Something about this seemed monumentally weird to the YouTube audience at large. Maybe it was the banality of the Baird sisters. Maybe it was the offensive undertones of rampant misogyny. This video spawned another, and soon Girl Defined became the bells of the ball on YouTube. Hundreds of creators shared their take. I mean, even The Right Opinion released a doc about them, and just when people started to get off the Girl Defined bandwagon, TikTok brought them back in a huge way. According to a BuzzFeed article from 2019, rogue TikTokers started chopping up the That's So Cringe videos into smaller clips and sharing them ad nauseum. Within the span of the year, the hashtag Girl Defined had over 5 million views. This led to a level of notoriety that the Baird sisters had never yet seen, and even if the attention was negative, it brought a whole lot of positive attention from people attracted to their content, to the point that even today, the Girl Defined YouTube page has 151,000 followers. Hence this being like an alternative Streisand effect. Folks made content to dunk on them, but this dunking seemed to have made Bethany and Kristen more powerful and more prominent. And their level of prominence has given them more opportunity to spread their, sometimes like fine content, but also spread their dangerous rhetoric to a wider audience. A rhetoric that perpetuates gross stereotypes that put gay, trans, and queer individuals at increased risks of violence, leveraging fear-mongering based on ideas that do not have the evidence to support them. For instance, in August 2022, Girl Defined dropped a video with the lovely title of "Drag Queens Are a Mockery of God's Design for Womanhood," a video that was terribly insensitive, beginning with the caption on the video describing males dressing up as overdeveloped, highly sexualized female. Now, to me, it seems obvious why this video is so off base, but I understand why it might not be to others. So let's talk through this from a place of learning and, again, perspective. I wanted to provide some context from somebody who has lived experience in this world, who can best explain why this is harmful. So allow me to introduce someone who doesn't need an introduction, Trixie Mattel, iconic drag performer and entrepreneur, who starts the analysis of the Girl Defined video by breaking down how Girl Defined are already starting from a flawed premise by positioning all drags as being appropriate or inappropriate for families.
To say that all drag is appropriate for children is wrong. To say that all drag is inappropriate for children is wrong. When I worked at Hamburger Mary's, let's say, we had the early seating where it was like no swear words. We were encouraged to do more like Disney numbers. That's when we bust out like the Barbie girl or like the Hocus Pocus number. There is that type of drag show. And then there is like, 1 a.m. nightclub drag queens stapling things to themselves drag show. So every drag show is different. Every drag performer is different. I mean, that's like making absolutes saying concerts are appropriate for children. Comedy shows aren't appropriate for children. All things are different, right? I'm telling you, there's a lot of family-friendly drag shows out there, and there's a lot of family unfriendly drag shows, like all of mine. So like one movie is explicit, so all movies are bad. Like, what is that? I personally do an adult act, and I would rather perform for all adults. And I don't advertise the show as for children.
I think this is an important distinction to consider, especially given that drag is not inherently sexual in nature. I really like this more casual definition of drag from the website Heckin' Unicorn, which states, "To do drag is to dress up or present yourself differently than your everyday gender, usually for expression or performance. Dragging is not an indicator of a person's gender identity." And to put that another way, the emphasis on drag is in expression and or performance, not necessarily an expression of sexuality, and honestly, not even most often. As Trixie puts it,
So someone came out and said, anyone who thinks drag isn't for children is wrong. Drag is expression, and children are such judgment-free beings that they don't really care what you're wearing, just what you're performing.
Okay,
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't disagree here. This person says drag is for children. I would say to assert that the entire art form of drag, every drag performer is for children, is wrong. And that's why things like this get so heated, because everybody wants to talk in absolutes. There is drag shows for children. They exist. Now, if your fundamental issue that you're offended by at a drag show is that you saw a man in a wig, that's not enough for me. If you saw a man in a wig, like with a crucifix chugging blood, and that could be an issue. But if you're saying base level, like a man in a dress is is offensive to me. I'm really not on your side at all. There's drag performers out there that even me at 15 years of drag, there's drag performers out there that I don't prefer to watch because they gross me out.
I mean, this is further backed up by an examination of drag by PBS that points out that virtually all anti-drag rhetoric is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of what drag even is and seeks to paint it as something predatory rather than what it essentially is, artistic expression. The term in a sexual sense describes how child M's entrap and harm their victims. It is used by opponents of drag as well as by protesters in other realms of LGBTQ opposition, seeks to falsely equate it with PDF files and other forms of CA.
Dressed up like women, now preying on these young children.
Okay, no, she didn't. She just said preying on these young children. You guys, I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna tell you something very fundamental. Nobody who does drag and thinks about kids. We don't get in drag thinking, I hope the kids in the audience like it. I hope the kids really turn up for me today. I hope the kids brought their tipping money. The whole thing of gay people and children and like the grooming, like wanting to children is like crazy. I never was at a drag show till I was 18. Do you think that going to a drag show makes you do drag?
What makes all of this even worse is that on top of conflating drag with something predatory, Beth and Chris Baird even start conflating it with, let me check my notes, oh yeah, mental illness? And they conflate drag with being trans?
I just think it takes common sense to look at and go, wow, this is a disaster. No wonder we are having so many mental problems in our own backyard.
You guys, I just don't understand. Like, what are you afraid of? Like, what is going to happen if you are eating a taco and some french fries, having a margarita, and a person in a wig walks by pretending to sing? If your faith is like, that's all it takes, like, whew. I saw somebody lip syncing with a puppet and now I'm not a Christian anymore. Like,
but in society, we're told, you know, men can be women, women can be men, anyone can be anything, really. And it does get so confusing.
And this is the other thing, you guys. I think that these people are having some cloudiness, and they're probably gonna watch this, whatever. I think you're having some cloudiness about drag and people who do drag wanting to become the other sex or another gender. That's not the case. Most of the time, like, I mean, people don't always do this because they like are trying to slowly quit the expression they're born. Like, that's not true.
Now, it is a conflation that even the most well-meaning of people who are trying to learn make all the time and can be really damaging. As Joanna McIntyre put it for The Conversation, trans refers to a personal gender identity and an authentic, lasting sense of self. In contrast, drag is a temporary and deliberate performance of gender.
I'm a female.
This is the thing, lady. To say that everybody who dresses in drag hates the body they're born in, doesn't want to be that, like, that's all so wild. And it's also interesting, I always bring it back to this, but it's funny that like when it's Tyler Perry doing Medea or like, you know, Dana Carvey doing Church Lady, anything like that, it's not drag and it's fine. But when it's like in a queer space, like there's a DJ involved and a disco ball and it's gay people watching, suddenly it's like trauma. We must all be traumatized.
The whole big push for drag queens to be mainstream, the confusion.
There's not this is also something. They keep talking about how drag is being pushed to be mainstream. This is what's happening. Drag queens are doing drag. People say, I wanna see that. I'm gonna go to that show. I'm gonna buy a ticket. I'm gonna download the record. I'm gonna watch the TV show. People are allowing themselves to be interested in this without it meaning anything deeper than you just watch someone's art form, someone's creative work. So they keep talking about how like drag's being pushed in the mainstream. It's like, Mary, unless I fly into your house in drag and take your dead arm while you're sleeping and make you click download like one of my albums or something, nobody's pushing you to do anything. People are willfully enjoying this because they don't care what people like this have to say about it. This is what's funny. It's sort of like when you hear like the gay agenda, and as a gay person, you're like, is there a PowerPoint that nobody has forwarded me? Is there a PDF? Because there's not more to it. Like drag queens don't have an agenda.
Trixie finishes off with perhaps the most nuanced take imaginable on Girl Defined.
These gals seem to believe that drag, like as an industry, as an art form, as a thing that exists, that there's some sort of like nefarious plot to it. I mean, at drag shows, our main plot is trying to get these cross-dressers on stage on time and hope they don't hand us a CD that skips. That's the main plan. So I feel like these women give us more credit than we deserve, because like, we're just doing drag. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know if this will get found by the Christians, but we're just doing drag. It's just dressing up. It's not, when you think about it, it's not even that interesting. I mean, it's a costume. It's a costume. When you dress as a pirate for Halloween, does it mean that, is it because you hate yourself and you want to be a pirate? Like, no. It's just dressing up.
And therein lies a lot of the divide in how Girl Define's rhetoric can ultimately be damaging of people who are just as deserving of compassion and their place in the world. At the time this video was released, a huge topic in the news related to accusations of grooming leveled against drag storytime hours and even drag queens as a whole. It is incredibly problematic to paint an entire subset of people as being all problematic or all Imagine if I were to say that Bethany and Kristen going out of their way to shame and invalidate an entire form of expression without any compassion or willingness to listen to the other perspective is not very Christ-like behavior and therefore means that all Christians are ignorant. That wouldn't be fair and it wouldn't be true. So I don't understand why they can't extend the same kindness and at least attempt to research before speaking about something like this.
I know that there are many people, and I've long, held the idea that there's just, of course, no excuse for things like racism, bigotry, prejudice, things like that. But then I'm kind of like, but then what? You know what I mean? Like, if there are behaviors, if someone is bigoted, if they're exhibiting prejudice against a vulnerable community, then what? Like, if we say, okay, that's wrong, please don't do that. Please don't treat people like that. But we don't try to get to the root of it. Why would someone feel that way? Why are they behaving that way? Then I feel like the solutions don't come. You know what I mean? Healing doesn't come. Unlearning doesn't happen because it's just like, you're bad, you're wrong, and that's it. And I'm just becoming more and more interested in like, okay, we've seen the behavior. Now, how do we get to a solution where things can be better, where someone can learn and it's just better for all of society?
Do you see what I mean? In contrast, we need only to look at the comments below Trixie's video. Evangelion 286 states, as a woman, I've never felt insulted by a drag queen or trans woman. I have, however, had Christian cis women repeatedly insult me and try to take my rights away. And Michelle Lynn 5698 states, as a former Christian who is a therapist, I can tell everyone I have never had clients traumatized by drag queens. I do have a lot of clients that have endured horrific trauma in churches and religious families. Stories like these are quite common and religious trauma is quite real. Neither party, however, is painting Christianity as a whole with as broad a brushstroke as drag queens are being painted. Now, as found on ResearchGate, somewhere between 33 and 37% of Americans report suffering from religious trauma of some kind. I have experienced that myself. And I still have my faith and beliefs, and I've had trauma from things. It's a thing that a lot of us experience. Whereas a 2022 study from UCLA found that only 20% of all registered S offenders identify as LGBTQ+ in the first place, meaning 80% of them identify as cis and straight. So like, let's just not get it twisted here, okay? Let's just not get it twisted. My point is, none of this should be painted in a broad brushstrokes on anything, and Bethany and KK's rhetoric is not helpful in the slightest, in my opinion. Still, the amount of grace Bethy in particular is not willing to grant other people should be remembered for basically everything that happens further down the line in this story. Again, people can change. We like to see it. Yeah, Bethany Baird, to be clear, has changed a lot since the dawn of Girl Defined, often in ways that can generously be viewed as promising, but perhaps more realistically as hypocritical in a lot of people's eyes, especially given when the Girl Defined approach started to change in a huge way, and the Baird sisters took two wildly different approaches to life when they became full-grown adult females. So the rub begins much further back in 2010 before Girl Defined, before the Models Wanted website, even when Kristen Baird became Kristen Clark after marrying a man named Zachary. What getting married did do was set the scene for an eventual wedge to create a gap between the sisters in a massive way that neither could have seen coming, especially when in 2018, Bethany herself actually got married to a man named David Beal, or Dave without an E for short.
David called me and said, even though we live in the same city, he called me and said, hey, I would really love to take you to dinner because I have something I'd like to talk about with you. And by now, I was really excited about the idea of being in a potential relationship with him. We had become such good friends in group settings, and I just really admired him and really admired a lot of qualities that I saw in him, and just had a ton of fun with him, just pure great fun.
Now, it's probably in our best interest here to wrap back around to the thing we talked about a while ago regarding the Baird sisters never having been kissed before. When Kristen got married, she was around 23 years old. Yes, people may think that's a little odd to be getting your first kiss, but given what the sisters' beliefs are, it makes total sense, and honestly, you don't have to rush into kissing anybody ever if you don't want to. But in 2018, dear old Bethy was 30 years old. Now, Drew Barrymore in the movie Never Been Kissed, film that treats her character Josie as some sort of damaged pariah for having, never gotten smooched, was 25. Drew herself was only 23 during production, which I did not know. I thought that was interesting. But that movie flat out should have been about Bethany Baird. And to be clear, again, no shade. If you haven't been kissed, then do you, boo. Whatever is making you happy. But none of you, I'm imagining, took the pivot that Bethany did into pretending to be an expert on the capital S, the dirty deed, and whether or not you're damaged goods. More on that in a sec. Now, like many, Bethany live streamed her wedding and turned it into a massive event that was streamed over 200,000 times. People like to see people get married. And like many of the other cringiest influencers around, Bethany posted about her relationship a lot. I've never posted about any relationship, so that's just quite the opposite to me. She vlogged about it, she posted on Instagram about it, and over the course of posting about it, there was a bit of a pivot. What do I mean by pivot? And why am I saying it like that? Well,
today on the Girl Defined Show, we are going to answer your hush questions about sex. Now, we actually took a deep dive into these questions in our book, Sex, Purity, and the Longings of a Girl's Heart. These don't need to be hush. We can talk about this as Christian women. We don't have to be afraid and shy, ooh, sex. We can go there. Today on the Girl Defined Show, we are talking about masturbation.
Needing some new Christian-friendly positions to try in the bedroom today? Check these out.
So here we are now, the woman who made her name talking about a purity culture, abstinent lifestyle, making a hard pivot into S-ual content, specifically targeting Christian women's S-lives. And it all seemed to start somewhere around the time that Bethany did this. Doesn't this seem like the kind of thing that Bethany would condemn as S-ually suggestive content being pushed out to the masses and should remain private? I mean, children might see this. I am confusion, but my interest is piqued. In 2023, Bethy unveiled what may be the biggest heel turn in the Fundy history, the ultimate S course for Christian women.
Don't have safe sex marriage. Wait. That's the message many of us heard growing up, and then we get married and we're like, okay, so is this what I waited all this time for? Sex is so difficult and beautiful and challenging and confusing all at the same time, and many of us just feel like, where do I go for answers? Where do I actually go for help? Unfortunately, in the Christian community especially, there has been a lot of silence around this issue, especially with women, and so a lot of married women feel like sex more of a duty rather than a delight and something that they really look forward to. And especially when it comes to the childbearing years and having young kids, it's sex seems like an extra burden rather than something that energizes and that you look forward to. And that's why I've created the ultimate course for Christian women. I brought together the best therapists, doctors, psychologists to bring this course to you.
This is a real thing, and this has been a gradual transition for Bethany, but one she's committed to almost entirely. If you go to her Instagram page now, gone are most references to anything resembling living that purity culture lifestyle, any of the more firebrand content that she used to release under the Girl Defined name, and anything that she originally made her name in. It's all been replaced instead with wall-to-wall references to finding pleasure in something that some women may may have viewed once as a duty, the hanky-a-panky. So what do you get with this course? Well, according to her website, this 2-week intensive is danged. It is designed to, quote, help you experience the most satisfying sexual pleasure and deepen your relational emotional connection with your man. You can experience more pleasure. Sadly, many women have bought into the lie that they're broken. I'm sorry, did you not refer to females as damaged goods if they had the big bad S before me? I'm getting flashbacks, I guess. Back to it. They believe something is wrong with them or their marriage, and mind-blowing pleasure just isn't in the cards for them. This is simply not true. Okay, so on one hand, this is not a bad idea. Premarital S is considered a sin in the faith, and the deed in general, even if married, is heavily stigmatized to the point of being almost never truly spoken about publicly. A course designed to provide education to a group of people who historically are not given a proper bedroom education is definitely a case of better late than never, in my opinion. Education is always the road to hopefully better life. But on the other hand, in what world is Bethany Beal the person to be handling a course like this? She has a history of shaming women, and virtually everything she learned about doing the dirty, she has learned in the past couple of years, allegedly. And when you look at the course overview and who wrote each lesson, 3 of the 11 sessions were authored by Bethany Beal herself. These are the types of people that Bethany has on board for her course, a course that in theory could be very helpful and yet falls into a very S-negative bias. Now, on the one hand, it's fairly easy to tell how unsuccessful this course appears to be for Bethany, since every paid customer gets access to a private Facebook group to discuss the lessons. And even though that group is private, the Fundy Snark Uncensored subreddit has found that you can see how many members are in the group, and even if you're not part of it. And as of May 2023, there were 211 people in the group. Now, I do have a question. I'm just curious. These are curious questions. If discussions about the big bad S, premarital S, post-marital S, if conversations about it, if thinking about it, if we're going back to the purity culture, thinking about it, talking about it, it generates lust or visions or pictures of anatomy unclothed or the horizontal tango happening. If you're talking about it in a forum with other people, would those purity principles not have said that that is a problem as well? You're not looking at illicit images, but you're having illicit conversations with other people talking about like what you're doing in the bedroom. It's just how do you keep moving the lines, the goalpost keeps changing, and I just don't know how to play the game. Now back to the 211 people in the Facebook group. So it's not that successful. However, it has at least been successful enough for Bethany to have pivoted to another course, also available for $169. The Ultimate Sexuality Mentorship Course for Single Women. What are we even doing here? And this time, half of the courses were written by Bethany. And it's especially confusing when your husband is saying things like this.
Bottle it up, keep it inside, and like express like positivity. This is great or whatever. And then just be like, it would just be like, we could have the crumbs, just the bare crumbs of love and intimacy for both of us, and then just be like pretending like that's great, this is so great. It's not. It's really, really not. So
here's the thing that's wild to me about Bethany's sharp pivot into all things bedroom activities, and I'll let Bethany cue up my point.
I did not realize how controversial aspects of intimacy could be. Like, genuinely, it's not until I started talking about like intimacy and different things within intimacy that I realized, like, wow, this is very divisive amongst Christians. In my mind, it's like, it's husband and wife. Like, enjoy what you want. Like, why are we trying to, like, I do not get it. Like, if it's between the husband and wife and they're both
because of the type of content that people like you made, Bethany, because you drilled the objectively toxic, misogynistic purity culture onto young, impressionable girls, teens, and females for years, profited off of it and haven't acknowledged your lack of compassion as to what that has done to people. It does cause so much guilt in some people and shame that they wind up in very harmful, very dangerous situations. It is beyond me that anyone ever thought it would be a good idea to continue to strip away a woman's independence and right to learn about herself, all because of your interpretation of something that you're not an expert on.
Is this the advice that Christian women really need? So, I am a Christian woman, and I hear from Christian women every single day in my DMs, in my emails, and especially since I started talking about intimacy.
Again, I'm trying to say this with as much kindness and perspective as I can. The way it appears, you and your sister spent video after video after video lecturing girls into feeling like freedom to learn, express themselves, and discover what makes them happy was shameful, and that their worth and their ability to be free was solely and completely dependent on whether or not they could find a man willing to marry them. Because men are what makes a woman valid in her journey, right? Listen, I'm not trying to sound harsh, and if Bethany is growing and changing past her purity culture rhetoric, then we should carve out space for someone to grow, even if she doesn't do the same for others. I think, I hope that Bethany is learning that the world isn't black and white, and that we can be respectful of others' beliefs and experiences. But what troubles me the most is how dangerous this whole woman needs to marry a man to exist as a full human being thing can be for women. If a girl grows up believing this, then she could easily find herself settling, or worse, agreeing to an abusive relationship simply because he was willing to put a ring on it. And if she doesn't get married, guess what? She'll have a much higher likelihood of suffering things like depression and feeling worthless, maybe self-harm, because content like yours taught her that she must bend herself to get a man because she's not complete without a man.
We were painting very black lines in scripture and saying this is what's biblical and this is what isn't. And we've come to realize the scripture doesn't actually draw those lines that we were drawing. It talks about modesty.
If you're admitting that you both were preaching black and white lines that don't actually exist in the Bible, then answer me one simple question. Why the hell is your inaccurate, fear-driven content still up? Since her new masterpiece is an online course on how to make courses. So welcome to She Works Smart. Quote, my name is Bethany Beal, and I'm excited to help you start your very own profitable online course business so that you can make money on autopilot. Imagine where your life could be 6 months from now if you started your own profitable course. You can change your future.
You are crushing it. You're doing amazing. You are taking steps towards launching a super successful online course that makes you passive income literally while you sleep.
I don't even know where to begin with this, since it's not entirely clear how profitable these courses have been for Bethany. And I'm just like, what is it with these zillions of people now teaching courses on how to teach courses when most often now they have absolutely no credentials whatsoever in the courses they teach, like SEL education? One thing's for sure though, She Works Smart is definitely a steal at its current price. You thought you were changing your life for that small fry $169 course? How about a $2,400 course? Because that's what a course about courses by the great Bethany Beal will now cost you. And if that's not your bag, that's okay. It's on sale for only $1,900 right now, or $400 a month for 6 months, which is $100 more than you'd pay for the $1,900 down. But hey, discounts, baby, yeah. Listen, courses aren't inherently bad, don't get me wrong, but courses on courses with information that is widely available for free by actual educators is a whole other thing. What makes all of this even weirder is that this isn't even just a hard pivot from her views on purity culture. This is a hard pivot from her views on being a girl boss. You remember the independent woman and how bad that is for femininity? Here's a video from Instagram in 2022, less than a year before Bethany became a hardcore girl boss, on how Bethany thinks women aren't interested in being girl bosses anymore.
I'm coming in hot with 5 things that women do not want anymore. Number 1, we don't want to compete with men in the workplace. Men can have the 9 to 5. Number 2, we don't want to spend our most fertile years chasing a job or a degree. Number 3, we don't want to put career before family. In fact, we want the opposite. Number 4, we don't want to be boss babes. Like, enough. And number 5, we don't want to hustle our lives away. So if you fall in that camp, follow along, stick with me, because we're going in a different direction.
Oh, did she really just say that women don't want to spend their most fertile f***ing years chasing a job or degree? But seriously, suggesting that women don't and shouldn't want to attain a high level of education or a career so that she can be a baby factory is wild, dude. Calling all trad wives, come on down, all you kitchen women, because career women are a thing of the past. And for her to then hard pivot into building a business around content is just fucking extra wild, dude. Today, the comments on this post are locked down, but according to a 2022 New York Post article, virtually every comment was actually furious with Bethany for implying that women don't care about their own independence anymore. Quote, "Please do not speak for all women. I value my college education and how quickly I am climbing up the corporate ladder, and I enjoy competition, whether it be with men or women. I also am high enough to essentially be my own boss too." Someone else pointed out the privilege, though they said it less colorfully than me, that being able to sacrifice work simply isn't an option for most women. Quote, "I'd love to be home more, but my family needs my income in order to have a roof over our heads and eat." The biggest frustration I have as I'm trying to see this from multiple sides is that there's no consistency whatsoever in the way that Bethany Beal has presented herself. She's basically like Schrodinger's influence. She's the embodiment of purity culture and anti-S when she needs to be, and the embodiment of a S-positive course seller who is anti-purity culture when she wants to be. Let's talk a minute about Heidi Baird, mother to the girl-defined women and 7 other siblings. Heidi is a bit of an influencer herself with a relatively sizable following on social media and her own cutesy aesthetic on her website. Quote, "Married 40 years to my love, Mike, who I share 9 beautiful children and 8 grandchildren together. We own our own business." Really? How could you? What? I didn't know women could own business. Okay, sorry. We homeschooled all of our children from kinder through high school. We love Jesus and the truth of God's word. For the last 25 years, I have had the greatest privilege of coaching women through the rough seasons of life. So it's all fine on the surface, right? A woman with her specific faith that she's allowed to have, raising family in that faith, which she's allowed to do. It happens every day, okay? Happens all the time. According to her website, Heidi also provides coaching services, more specifically mentoring services that cost $110 per hour that help you work through the deepest places of your heart and the most challenging burdens in your life. I will share with you my years of experience as a mentor, mom, and speaker. Whether you are a lonely, single, tired mom or a new empty nester, we will dive deep into God's word and unlock his beautiful and freeing truths for any and every challenge in your life. Now, it's not entirely clear how successful Heidi's own brand of mentoring has been for women that have utilized it, but one thing is clear. If what her oldest son, Michael Mershon, has to say is true, then Heidi Baird might be one of the single most evil people in the girl-defined story, allegedly. So what am I talking about? Well, this all comes from posts made on the Fundy Snark Uncensored subreddit. In a post dated June 2023, Michael wrote, "I am the oldest Baird child and I don't align with much, if anything, of what my sisters, Girl Defined, say. But they get enough hate and don't need it from me as well. I will not talk about my sisters despite disagreeing with them. I am here to speak my truth about the I suffered at the hands of my parents, but specifically my mother. I was homeschooled my entire life and was a victim of ongoing abuse of multiple kinds. I am a survivor of CSA by a female neighbor when I was around 7 years old. I know my mother knew about it because she walked in on it happening. I was also an S-aid at around 11 years old by a male neighbor at our next house. I was made to feel like a victim and that it was my fault, which led to repressed memories that didn't resurface till I was in my 30s. It has been roughly 5 years since I started dealing with my past SA, and to this day have never received anything close to a sincere apology from my mother, Heidi Baird. To this day, my mother accuses me of living in a victimhood mentality that I need to take to God and let him heal me. My mother is a toxic person and nothing that you see on any of her posts is authentic or real. What Michael is describing is a very disturbing series of alleged abuse that he endured, that he further alleges his mother knew about and did nothing to help him. Furthermore, if what he's saying is true, then she was essentially accusing Michael of being the problem by living in a victimhood mentality and telling him to turn to God. And when I tell you that I have been told the exact same thing, I was told the same thing by people in a church. Now, is this how all people of specific faiths feel about survivors? Absolutely not. But does this type of religious shame on survivors happen? Yeah, unfortunately it does, and it's heartbreaking. If what Michael shared is true, and I'm not doubting him, these are allegations, we have to leave it at that. If these allegations are true, then that would make Heidi Baird a pretty awful person, allegedly, because every single part of how Heidi is helping her firstborn son to cope with his own trauma, to me, relates to the idea that everything needs to be perfect. Purity culture, it needs to be pure. Through Michael's posts, he avoids many direct questions relating to Bethany and Kristen, but because of, the cracks, you can start to put a picture together of the girl's relationship with Heidi, potentially. For instance, at one point he says, "I feel for my sisters. They are victims of my mother's toxicity as well as I do hope they find their way out." Later, he explicitly says, "I do know Heidi mentors many, many women, and her message gets amplified as long as she has control of my sisters and their girl-defined platform," which to me is a pretty huge allegation that Heidi Baird may control Girl Defined. Is it true? I don't know that we'll ever know. When you take a step back and you remember the origin story of Girl Defined, with Bethany, turning down a basketball scholarship and Kristen stepping away from modeling, suddenly the picture may be a lot more clear. Both of those situations happened after talking with their parents, and I cannot and will not say for sure that Heidi Baird coerced her daughters into quitting the things that they loved and molding them into her image. I don't really have the evidence to back that up. A lot of people call her something of a cult leader, which I also can't substantiate, but what I can say is that in time, the Girl Defined story may get a whole lot darker if Michael Mershon speaks up more, or if Bethany or Kristen decide to blow a whistle on their own mother and potentially confirm the allegations that Michael has already made. And that makes me wonder, if Heidi is as Michael says, does that change our perspective of Bethany and Kristen? I'm not even gonna give my thoughts on an answer to that. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Please do leave them down below. On February 23rd, 2024, Morgan and Paul, a pair of fundy influencers known as Paul and Morgan, released a video titled 24 Hours with Bethany Beal, Girl Defined, in which the two detail the time they spent interviewing Bethany and Dave. As Bethany herself puts it, "They asked us tough questions about our marriage and our spiritual beliefs. We opened up in a way we never had before." This was followed on March 5th with a video response where the pair revealed a couple of interesting tidbits that recontextualized their relationship, Dave's faith, and even Bethany's entire pivot.
I've been circling deconstruction, just to use the term loosely. I'm okay with the term.
I'm not against it.
You're not against it?
I'm not against it at all. I think there's this misconception that I'm against it, but it's more just like when you typically hear the term deconstructing, I typically think of someone like completely deconstructing from their faith. And yes, I am deconstructing certain parts of my faith, but I personally am still very much like a believer in Jesus and very much think what trying to understand the word and living it out practically is important. So I don't want to be labeled
I don't really care for the label, I guess,
Yeah.
but I'm okay with it anyway.
Now, what Dave and Bethany are referring to is deconstruction, a term often used in religious spaces, but often used interchangeably between multiple definitions to the point that not everyone understands what is being said. As Christianity Today puts it, for some people, deconstructing means losing their faith altogether, becoming atheists, agnostics, or spiritual but not religious. For others, deconstructing means still believing in Jesus, but struggling with how religious institutions have failed, and there are also many for whom deconstructing means maintaining an ongoing commitment to Orthodox Christianity as well as a robust commitment to the church, but without the cultural political baggage associated with the label evangelicism. As far as how Dave means it,
there are kind of two different types of deconstruction that I think of when it comes to the popular stuff that is kind of happening in this trend, the trend that's happening. And one is, it's almost like you're consciously deconstructing in the sense of you're actively questioning beliefs and like, is this true, is that true? And it's almost like you're taking things apart. And then there's the kind of deconstruction where people describe it as pulling a thread and it's just kind of like the whole thing falls apart. It's like you're not even going towards everything. It's just kind of like everything's sort of crumbling and then you're just in this crisis mode and nothing's left. And I would say for me, it feels a little bit more towards the first one, but I'm sure there's probably a mix.
So in regards to how Christianity Today reports it, Dave seems to be falling more so into a sort of blend of all three definitions: struggles with one's own faith, struggles with institutions, and the cultural political baggage. Though Dave interestingly appears to have more of a personal relationship to why this struggle even began in the first place.
But I felt constrained by myself, my own inability or lack of desire to challenge certain institutions that I'm a part of or challenge certain communities, because that would throw things into chaos. That would, it would be hard to go to church. It would be hard to be married to Bethany. It would be hard to do a lot of these things. I'm established in Christian community, so it just makes it, because of my own choice to be in Christian community, it makes it challenging if I'm gonna basically say, hey, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore. I basically got to a point where it wasn't enough of a reason for me to not take that next step. And for me, it's like just kind of acknowledging all of my questions and doubts just all at once and just being like, actually, I'm not sure this is true. I kind of hope it's not. It feels like I finally got the balls to basically be honest about things that I've thought for a long time.
Throughout the course of this response, he describes how this has been a journey 8 years in the making, one that has eaten away at him to a troubling degree.
And I apologize to Bethany because I haven't always been honest with her. And when we got married, I'd already started deconstruction. So at the time, I was like, this is just going to cause problems in our relationship. So I was just like, all right, I believe that the Bible is your word and I accept this authority and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of tried to push myself over the edge to make it work. And that was disingenuous and a lack of integrity, honestly. And I didn't really know how to stand up and just say, this is what I think, in the face of the anxiety that it could cause both in other people and in myself. So I've apologized to Bethany, said, I'm sorry for selling you a picture of myself that's not been true.
To be honest, this is a solid and healthy move for Dave to make, as well as a pretty normal one. If he's struggling with the very institutions that he's a part of, then deconstructing his beliefs can be healthy as he finds himself. And to be clear, Bethy is quite supportive of this evolution, but is still struggling a bit with it.
When we got married, I still look back and it's like, I have so much confidence that we're supposed to be together. And I have so much confidence that we are like super uniquely gifted to like really love each other. And I think we have and people have told us like, that we sought counsel from and stuff, just have been so encouraging and supportive of how we've been able to like press toward each other and love each other and have these conversations and not just like run away from each other in fear or like separate, but we've been able to like grow. And I think we love each other more now than we did 3 weeks ago, a year ago, when we got married, obviously. Yeah. I want to be with you. But it is hard. It's hard to think like, we are going to church together right now. Mm-hmm. And, you are leading our family in like a morning devotional.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when you hear about like, oh, where like one couple deconstructs and the other doesn't. At least even having talked to friends and stuff, there can be a lot of, even just that sort of stuff, like talking about the Bible or talking about Jesus or church can become like super high tension. But I've appreciated just like your maturity in that way of not being like, well, I'm not doing that, or don't
teach the kids about that.
Listen, I've said all along that people can grow and change and space should be given for that, and this is no exception. The video is a surprisingly raw and honest example of introspection from Bethany, and one that I hope bodes well for where she goes in the future. The truth is, Bethany has not always allowed herself this level of introspection and rarely, if ever, allows herself to fully open up, at least publicly. Sympathetically speaking, you can see that this development is genuinely challenging to Bethy's own faith, especially given that she claims to have no interest in deconstructing herself, which she has the right to not to. I think her approach to Dave's crisis of faith is kind of sweet. I'm just kind of like hoping beyond hope that given Bethany's own evolutions in regards to sexuality and now faith, that she can begin to challenge some of the rhetoric that Girl Defined has spewed that has been so genuinely harmful to other people.
We come under regular fire for our biblically rooted beliefs in things like identity, gender, sexuality, womanhood, what it means to be a man and a woman. So would you consider, as this year comes to a close, giving a donation to Girl Defined? And whether you can give $1, $5, $100, or $5,000, we see every single donation that comes into our nonprofit here at Girl Defined, and it encourages us and it helps push the message of God-defined womanhood forward.
Right now, it truly only seems, in my opinion, that Bethy is willing to challenge her beliefs if something happens that directly affects. She gets married, she kisses and does bedroom activities, and suddenly she opens up more progressively on sexual ideology. Her husband deconstructs, and suddenly she has compassion for someone with different beliefs who happens to be her husband. That's great, it is. I just wish that she would now extend that same compassion and understanding and openness to everyone else outside of her bubble.
And this is my final perspective question for you. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments, because now that we've heard about, there could potentially be some things going on with their mother, and then of course the fundamentalist faith, and was that abused in a way in their upbringing? Does that explain some of their behavior? Not excuse it, but does it explain some of it? And so now I'm curious, when I listened to her talking with Dave about him deconstructing, she also mentioned that she's just deconstructing parts of her faith. And I think that a lot of people who come from religious households and backgrounds do deconstruct parts of their faith. And so I think that potentially that is a sign of change, maybe of maturity, maybe of unlearning some behaviors. Unfortunately, it hasn't applied to the LGBTQ plus community, but I still can reserve hope that it might one day. But let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comments.
Okay, I think we need a bit of a kitty palate cleanser, and then I will conclude with my final thoughts. Look at the babies. They're just so cute. I love them. Remember, you can grab your pieces from the brand new Petty University Valid collection and the Valid Rib Cage by tapping the link below and in the pinned comment. Join the Valid Social Club. I truly believe that you're going to love these pieces as much as I do. I designed them specifically to be a constant reminder of just how incredible, beautiful, and valid you are, no matter what you look like, no matter who you love, no matter what you have survived, the invisible illnesses that you endure, or what you do with your life. You are valid and you are so loved. Also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, both linked below. That's where I post most often. I have polls, I check in on life, and I also post opportunities to be featured in upcoming documentaries. Also, did you know that I have a brand new second channel called Swoop 2? Are you subscribed to my second channel? Be sure to join me in a new adventure and learn a new language in just 10 minutes a day with Babbel. Tap my link below to get a huge 60% off and treat yourself to new experiences and new memories. You deserve it, honey. At the end of the day, with stories like this, I think a lot of it comes down to a few basic principles: compassion, education, and understanding. 3 words that Girl Defined, at least in their earliest iterations, missed the mark on a number of times, but maybe there's a chance that at least Bethany is learning. Maybe. I can only hope. We live in a world, like at least in this country, where acceptance for those who view and experience the world differently than someone else is given very little space to coexist. And I think that that's tragic. I think it's a missed opportunity to enrich our cultures, inform our perspectives, and embrace the fact that diversity and inclusiveness is what makes us beautiful and, more importantly, what makes us valid. I'd like to believe that those principles are what most religions can agree on, but unfortunately there are individuals who refuse to operate with kindness because rage baiting and condemnation are perhaps more fun for them, you know? Hurt people, hurting people. If you take anything away from this doc, the most important thing I can say has nothing to do with Girl Defined and everything to do with you watching. You are valid. You have a right to exist just as you are, and you are loved, even if it feels like the world hates you. You are not damaged goods. Prejudice and ignorance will sadly always be a character in these stories, but it doesn't have to be the main character. Keep your head up. I am here for you. And when all else fails, stay ready, stay petty. Class dismissed. Swoop!